So it is currently around 30 degrees here in Ohio, and my battery's down to about 12%. And I figured today is a perfect time to do some winter range testing. It was originally supposed to be like under 10 degrees today, but unfortunately that didn't pan out, which I guess is kind of a good thing because I really don't like the cold. But we're gonna head to a supercharger right now, get charged up, and I will tell you my whole route I'm gonna do and the plan for this winter range test. And just as I pulled up to the supercharger with around 10%, I got this warning saying I needed to plug in immediately, which I did. So the battery actually charges fastest when it's at a low state of charge. So before I could even turn my camera on, it had doubled to 22% battery, which is pretty crazy. And this is a V2 supercharger, so it doesn't have those crazy speeds, but it was getting over 100 kilowatts, and I believe the peak is around 120. So I don't think the cold necessarily influenced how fast my charging was here. So our plan for this winter range test, I guess an efficiency test is probably a better way to put it. My plan is to drive south down to Chillicothe, where there's a V3 supercharger. I haven't been to this one before, so I wanted to go check it out. So we'll drive down there, stop and charge for a little bit, and then just head back up to the chargers I'm at right now. Right now, the car is estimating that we won't be able to make it. We'll have 0% when we arrive, so we'll need to charge for about 10 more minutes. In terms of recording data for this trip, I'm going to rely pretty heavily on this trip meter that the Tesla has built in, like a lot of other cars, but this will show us our miles driven, our kilowatt hours used, and then our watt hours per mile efficiency. This will give us a pretty clean number in terms of comparing different types of driving. So I'll be comparing whatever number we get to my driving style, so my lifetime watt hours per mile, which is 293, as well as Tesla's rated watt hours per mile, which for my car, the long range Model 3 pre-refresh and with the 18-inch aero wheels is about 242 watt hours per mile. The car's estimating that we'll arrive with about 20%. We charged up to 132 miles, and the exterior temp is around 32 degrees, right at that freezing point. And as you can see, we've got a little bit of flurry and a lot of snow buildup here in Ohio. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and reset this trip meter right here. I'm going to just rename this to our south trip because we're going south for this leg of the trip. So we're going to do one trip south, record our watt hours per mile going south, and then do the same trip going north, resetting that trip meter and seeing what our watt hours per mile is going on both legs. So we're starting with 132 miles, and I'm going to speed through a lot of this because it's a pretty boring drive, quite honestly. But wanted to share my experience driving an EV in the winter and how much my range has been affected. Have I been concerned about running out of charge or anything like that? And the shorter answer is no. I think driving an EV, you start looking at your range a lot more because you are concerned about it running out. But honestly, the cold has not affected my car to the point where I haven't been able to drive the way I want to. So I'm still able to make all the drives I want to, drive the way I want to drive, and the winter has not affected that. And a reminder too is that ICE vehicles and gas cars are all affected by the cold as well. We just might not notice it as much because we don't have this range number staring us in the face the whole time. And at this point, after driving my car for over a year, I have my car set on percent. I don't even show miles anymore because it is so misleading with how much you can drive. If you drive very conservatively, then you can make it a lot farther than your range is going to show you. And vice versa. If you're driving very aggressively or very fast, your range isn't going to last as long. Okay, so we are 22 miles in already. We've used 6 kilowatt hours and we're only at 268 watt hours per mile. So only a bit of an increase over our baseline of 240. If we look at my lifetime average, we're actually less than my lifetime average watt hours per mile efficiency. Alrighty, this is the smallest bank of chargers I think I've ever seen. They've got them just back to back here though. And we ended with 21%, and let's see what our range was again, 62 miles. So I believe the computer estimated we'd have about 20% when we got here, and we're right over that, so good estimation. So before we plug in here, let's take a look at our results. So we started with 132 miles of range, and when we arrived, we had 62 miles of range. So we used 70 miles according to the range meter that is on the touchscreen there. Only problem is we only drove 60 miles, meaning we used 10 more miles of range than we actually drove. That's about a 16.7% increase If we want to look at that in terms of efficiency, we use 272 watt hours per mile versus the 242 rated. So used more than our rated watt hours per mile, but this actually ended up being less than my overall average watt hours per mile since owning my car, at about 20 fewer watt hours per mile. So very interesting results on this first leg. We're going to get charged up now and then head back up north to the Polaris supercharger and see how much energy that uses. So these are the V3 superchargers. They've got the slightly thinner cord on them. Same process to plug them in though. It's still ramping up, it looks like. We're about 167 kilowatts. That might be where it tops out though, because we came in with about 20%. It is the fastest when it's like under 10, like very low, but still getting very fast charging speeds. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in our destination. We're just going to go right back to the Polaris supercharger, just going to go right back up north. So it's saying we only need to charge for 10 minutes to get back to Polaris. Pretty incredible with these V3 superchargers. That was like an hour drive. So, and I didn't even charge up all the way. I only charged to around 50%. So very, very impressive. All right, so we are charged up to 223 miles. Let's see what percent that is. 75%. Did it pretty quickly here. So we're gonna go ahead and rename this to our north trip now. Go ahead and save that and then reset it. We're gonna do basically the same route, just going north now up to the Polaris supercharger. So let's get on our way here. I'm going to time-lapse through this whole road trip as well because it is basically the same one, just going in the north direction now. But if you are paying attention, drop a lightning bolt emoji in the comments so I know you're paying attention. And here we are. So that trip was 60.2 miles, used 20 kilowatt hours, and we had an efficiency of 334 watt hours per mile and ended with 135 miles. So again, looking at results here, we had a starting range of 223 miles, and when we arrived, we had 135 miles, meaning we lost 88 miles of range, but only drove 60.2 miles. That means we used 28 more miles of range than we drove, meaning a 46.2% increase. If we want to look at efficiency, we used 334 watt hours per mile, which is about 90 more than rated and about 40 more than my average. So comparing the two trips, on the first trip down to Chillicothe, we had an average efficiency of 272 watt hours per mile. But then heading back up north, we had an average efficiency of 334 watt hours per mile. So I'm not sure exactly what changed between the drive down and the drive up. I do know that I might have been driving a bit faster because it was getting late and I needed to get home. But in terms of temperature, that stayed pretty much consistent. It was maybe 4 degrees colder on the drive up than the drive down. So that might have played a role, but honestly, I think your driving style plays way more of a role in conditions like this than the actual temperature does. And again, like I mentioned in my other video where I did some testing on preheating the car and the battery, this is all kind of anecdotal evidence. This isn't a large scale experiment with a lot of different trials and stuff. This was just my experience on a short little drive I took. But I think if you can take anything away from this, it's that if you are concerned about losing a lot of range or not being able to make it to your destination, I think with a little bit more planning and more conservative driving, you can stretch out a lot more range out of your car than you think. So that's all for this one. Let me know your thoughts on this. If you own an EV, I want to know what your winter driving experience has been like. Have you experienced a huge drop in range or had it to the point where you couldn't make drives you wanted to take? Or if you don't own an EV, was this eye-opening to you to see what the factors are that influence range? Let me know down in the comments below. That's all for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.